all, I'm Elliot, and today we're going to be discussing the Mormon Migration and all the aspects that came into play on their journey. Let's get started! Though Mormons make up less than 1% of the population, you probably know or have at least met one Mormon person. But where did they come from, and how did they get here? You see, in 1820, Joseph Smith discovered what would later come to be known as Mormonism. Then, in 1830, Joseph Smith founded the first LDS church. One of the teachings that Smith taught was the concept of a holy city of God, or Zion. While searching for the gathering place of Zion, they began to travel to the early states. In their travels, they stopped in the city of Missouri, but due to their eccentric beliefs, Governor Boggs issued an extermination order on the Mormons. In the face of persecution, the Mormons traveled across the Mississippi River to begin a new life in Illinois. Unfortunately, malaria wiped out most of the population, but the survivors began to build Nauvoo. Nauvoo was founded around the Nauvoo Temple, a symbol of redemption in the face of immense loss. Nauvoo means beautiful, which was the name given to the city by Joseph Smith, due to a vision he claimed to have received from the Lord. Great unrest began to develop in Nauvoo, as many of the members began to leave the church. Some of the people who left founded a newspaper entitled the Nauvoo Expositor. The Nauvoo Expositor began to reveal some of the more hidden sins of the LDS Church, including the subject of Smith's marriage bed. In Hebrews 13, verse 4, the Bible says, "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge." Though the Mormons claim to use the King James Version of the Bible as one of their primary resources, this verse directly opposes their leader's greatest sin, polygamy. In anger, Joseph Smith raided the Nauvoo Expositor and burned all the papers and major machines. Because of this violence, though provoked by the paper, Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram Smith were arrested by Governor Ford. Governor Ford promised them protection, but the evening after they arrived in Carthage jail, an angry mob burst in. A large gunfight ensued. In the end, Joseph Smith had killed 2 men, but ended up dying himself. To this day, Mormons see Joseph and Hiram Smith as martyrs, but martyrs don't shoot back. Due to mob violence, the Mormon Church was forced to move their group once again, and set their sights towards the Great Basin, which was at the time colonized or ruled over by Mexico. Brigham Young planned on moving the 17,000 people during the spring, but due to increased mob violence, the Mormons prepared to leave sooner, which was consequently in the middle of the winter. Moving 17,000 Mormon people in the middle of winter seemed an impossible task, but under the encouragement of Brigham Young, the new church leader, the Mormons prepared to make the journey. Before continuing the story of Mormon pilgrimage, let's do a quick background check on Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Both Smith and Young were born in Vermont and moved to New York in their early teenage years. Joseph Smith discovered the religion of Mormonism when he was 14 years old, but he officially founded it as a religion when he was 24. Brigham Young's mother died when he was 14 years old, and was converted to Mormonism in his late 20s and early 30s after his wife's death. Brigham Young grew close to Joseph Smith, and when Smith died, he took it upon himself to lead the Mormon people. Alright, with this in mind, let's get back to the story. Many of the Mormons left during the winter, some riding across the Mississippi River in a ferry, while others crossed later in the month when the river froze over. Still others stayed behind, gathering supplies and waiting for sick family members to heal, and crossed in the spring and early summer. Some stayed behind in Nauvoo for good. Among them were Smith's mother, brothers, first wife, and children. They stayed behind to follow Joseph Smith's son, Joseph Smith III. The journey to the Great Basin was a long and tiring trek, especially with the babies, ill, and elderly people having to be helped along the path and tended to. Sometimes, the Mormons stopped at settlements to get jobs, and often ended up starting small communities in the towns they stayed in. In Exodus 16:2-3, it says, "And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." In the same way, the Mormons longed to go back to the comfortable homes they had had in Nauvoo. Many different groups of Mormons traveled to the Great Basin. By taking old Indian trails and studying travel maps, the Saints made it to Nebraska in time to build winter lodgings. Life in the winter quarters brought no rest to the weary pilgrims. There was much sickness and not enough food or clothes, and unfortunately, many died. The survivors of yet another heavy toll on their population were eager to move west and begin colonizing in the Great Basin. Not too long after the winter had passed, the Americans, who had recently declared war on Mexico, found the Mormons encamped along the outskirts of Iowa. The Mormons proved to be a large addition to the American army, but the job was not without benefit for the Mormons. The soldiers' pay that the Mormon men were offered would go a long way when buying new teams of oxen, new wagons, and more supplies. Over 500 men joined the soldiers. Many of their wives were distraught at how they would manage to make the trip to the Great Basin without them, and in the end, 35 Mormon women joined their husband, taking 42 children along with them. When the Mormon men got sick, they were accompanied back to the settlements by their children and wife. Though the Mormon soldiers' help in the war was not required, as the battle ended before they could reach Mexico, they were signed to guard California. Afterwards, many of the men joined San Brannan's in San Francisco and were involved in the discovery of gold at Sutter's Fort. Others later joined their family in the Salt Lake Valley. Let's step away from the soldiers and return to the path with the pilgrims. In the spring of 1847, Brigham Young led a small expedition across the prairies that are now known as Nebraska and Wyoming. They soon realized that traveling straight through the rough terrain would be impassable, so Brigham Young sent an organization called the Pioneer Company ahead to clear large boulders and fallen trees, making a way for the thousands of Mormons that would soon follow. Before continuing, let's go on ahead with the Pioneer Company. The Pioneer Company was responsible for improving the trail. They accomplished their job thoroughly, removing rocks and felling trees, marking the trail and writing guides on where to find natural essentials, such as fresh water, fuel, and grazing areas. They also wrote where suitable campsites could be found. The Pioneer Company was not only composed of men. There were also 3 women, Ellen Sanders, Kimbach, Harriet Decker Young, and Clara Decker Young, by name. 2 young boys, a handful of teenage boys, and 3 black slaves, Green Flake, Oscar Crosby, and Hark Lay. The advance company traveled over the North Platte River, which was one of the biggest delays in their trip, through the Rocky Mountains, and crossing the Continental Divide. They were held up crossing the Green River. Finally, they reached the California Territory. They continued their pilgrimage, eventually arriving in Wyoming in early July. During their brief 2-day stay at Fort Bridger, they repaired their wagons and rested in preparation for the last 116 miles ahead of them. The valley was first looked upon on July 22, 1847, by a scouting party of 2 men. Upon sighting, the men threw their hats into the sky and shouted, "Hosanna!" In Matthew 21:9 it says, "And the multitudes that went before and that followed cried, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" Let's return to the joyful Mormons that have made the trek behind us. As the Mormons entered the Salt Lake Valley, they saw it as a blank slate, a new place to thrive, a place full of hope and a bright future under the care of the Mormons. Mormons are a group of people we interact with here in Utah almost every day of our lives. And though we may not realize it, we owe a lot of what we see today to this particular group of people. The Mormons walked a hard road, not only through the mountainside, but also in the face of persecution. Learning about Mormon history and culture can help us to be better witnesses to our Mormon friends and acquaintances. I hope this podcast was educational, and you learned as much as I did during the making of it. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you have a great day. Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Remember to always be a witness, a shining light for Jesus in this spiritually dark world.